for those of you who joined us last week, you saw that we had a little bit of an issue, and it was surrounding our beta version of Exact Forms Plus and our beta version of our EFP configurator, and trying to do repeating columns. That's kind of where we blew up. So, and I'm glad it happened, because it does happen. We're not perfect, and we do have some issues here and there. So, but I wanted to kind of go through that again, just so that we see that you're repeating. I wanted to go through repeating values, repeating columns, because I think it's a good piece of functionality. And really, it was derived from an elevator customer that we had, that they manage cars for elevators. So they wanted to produce proposals for their customers. And when they did produce their proposal at the beginning, this is what the output would look like. Whoops, not that one. That's a different proposal. All right, so this is my elevator proposal. So it's basically going to list out all of the cars. So in this record, there's like 12 or so cars, 13 cars. And some of the buildings that they were dealing with had more than 13, 15, 20, 30 cars. So they didn't want it to look like this, because it kind of looks a little silly just having one, because the whole meat of the proposal was, hey, we're going to charge you X per elevator, blah, blah, blah. But here are the different car numbers that we're going to manage for you and service for you. So they asked me for a way to kind of satisfy that and maybe use all of this white space. So that's where we came up with repeating columns. So really we want to do is we want to take this and we want to kind of spread it out a little bit here. So that's the value of repeating columns. So if I go into that template, which is my elevated template here, and I have a subtable, so I'm going to go into my configurator, and I'm simply going to go, on my sub columns, I have one field selected, but I really want to repeat it. So if I go to my last formatting options, maybe I want to spread it out 5 columns. So let's do that. Let's close. Now let's go back to that estimate, and let's see what it looks like. So there we go. So that was taking care of all of that white space, and I could have had 6 columns, whatever. And what it does is it goes left to right. So that would be number 1, that would be number 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now, the other thing he asked too is, hey, you know what? I don't really want all of this car number. So how can we handle that? Let's get rid of that. So that if you go back into our subtable that we were in for the cars, we can simply get rid of the headers and borders. So now, instead of showing that same proposal with headers, car number, and even the borders, they didn't want the borders, they just wanted to be straight out text. There you go. So that's the value of repeating columns, is that you can take care of this white space if you don't have a lot of columns that you want to kind of show throughout this document in subtables. So I thought it was worth mentioning that. So a couple of the other things I wanted to talk about with subtables is varying subtables in a single document. So what does that mean? So if I want to, if I have a couple of subtables, so obviously I have a bunch of subtables configured here, but I don't want to have a different template because I want to use a different subtable. So I have a record here, and I have a field here called varying subtables. So typically in our template, we use something like this, right? strid equals 1. But instead of doing that, I'm going to use field 46 in this case, because 46 is really varied. I have a variable piece of code in here that says when this checkbox is on, I'm going to edit this record. When that checkbox is clicked, strid 2, otherwise strid 6, and this field ID is field 46. So that's why I put field 46 in here instead of hard coding my strid. So that document template, and actually since Mike asked for the alignment, I'm just going to bring that back down. I'm actually going to make this change and upload this this changed template to template table. Let's just see if that holds true, like Mike asked. I'm going to go back into my templates. I'm going to go to my varying subtables, upload that template. Let's go back to that record. So right now, the first ST-rib we're going to use is 6. So when we click this button here, and it's actually going to use template 3. It's also a way to vary the templates. Do the same thing. I'm just going to use the template number 1. Actually, I do want to use template number 3 because that was the one. Yes, I want to use template number 3. So that's another thing you can do with formula fields is you can control the template that's used. So in this case, instead of having another button to say use template number 3 or template number 1, I have a button that says use template number 3. So when I click this that document button, and Mike, if you look, we did left justify, so
Perfect.
that held. So in here, I use this ST-rid. So this was ST-rid number 1, which showed a lot of different line items here. But if I want to use a different subtable, I'm just going to click this use no header, no border. So now it's going to show it's going to use ST-rid number 2 instead. So now we're going to see a little bit different in this template now. So we're still using template number 3, but we use a different subtable. So that's one way to vary the subtables. Instead of having multiple templates, you can use some formula code in Quickbase and then just reference the field that's referencing the selected subtable.
Hey, Keith, can you show field 46 right now? Because I think that's the variable field you're using, right?
Yep, this is field 46.
Yeah, so Julie, I think this is what you're asking. So you can use any checkbox field. It's not a special checkbox.
And you can use any complex formula in here as well. So you can say if the status of the record is active, use ST-rid number 5. Else, and always have a default. Like in this case, I said, well, if no header, no border is on, use 2. If the use images subtable is on, use 6. Otherwise, use 1.
That's a great, snipping there, right there, because a lot of clients have similar questions to that all the time. So that's a great one.
So one other question we get asked a lot is, I want to be able to combine columns. So instead of just having straight out column 1, column 2, column 3, maybe I want to take column 1 and column 2 and put them together. So what I did was I created a field here called info. So I have network installed as my item, and then I have a description field as well. So instead of having them as 2 separate columns, maybe I want them to be 1 column in a subtable. So I created a simple formula that said, all right, take the item and the description field and put it together into 1 field. So now I'm going to show this field in my subtable as opposed to showing item and then description. So it's simply just using a little bit of HTML, and you can use rich text fields, and you don't have to use rich text fields. You can combine them with just text fields. But in this case, I wanted to show it a little differently. And I just want to go to my related estimate. I believe it would be template number. I'm trying to think what template I created that in. It's probably template number 1. Here. Use template number 1. Okay. Template number 1 has a bunch of subtables in here. This is one of my subtables, but here's my other subtable. So here's, instead of showing, so this is my info column. And what I did was I hid the borders and I hid the column headers, just like I did in our repeat columns, so that I can see I have one column that basically shows 2 fields from my subtable. I could have did 3 fields. I could have did 4 fields. I could have combined a whole bunch of different things in here. So just by going into my line items table and creating an info field and adding some HTML in there, you can see that here's my Cisco routers, 5G. Here's my widgets. This is a description. Here's my server, Dell PowerEdge. So that's one way to take a couple of fields and put them together. So instead of them also looking this way, now they look stacked. So record number 1 is here, record number 2 is here, record number 3 is here, and so on. So that's just another option for combining columns in a subtable. And I can pull that up. What the other thing I wanted to show is how do we actually, if I want to group, because in this one document here, we did group. And I want a subtotal and I want a total. So we're doing that right now. And I wanted to control the subtotal label. So I actually created a field on my items table, again, another variable field. And I called it total label. So that you can see that my total label here is dynamically going to be created. And it's going to say total for something, total for stock. So if I take a look at this field here, it's basically saying total for item status. It's because I'm grouping by item status. So you can see backordered. I want to see a label that said backordered, because sometimes you might have maybe 50 line items and you don't want to go back up here and say, hey, what was that group again? I'm looking at the subtotal. So what is it? You can just look simply here. Right here is this is a subtotal for backordered. And how did I do that? So what I did was in this actual configurator itself, on my subtotal fields, I chose my fields as normal. And when I'm totaling fields, I also can specify that I want a subtotal and grand total. But when I go to my sorting and grouping, I chose to sort by item status. But down here, I said, well, I want to include a subtotal label, and I want to include it in column description. And I want to use a variable field for my table, and I chose item status. And also, when I was totaling, I did the same thing. I wanted in the description column, I wanted to show the total label field, the value from the total label field. Now, I could have just had a static text field. I could have just said total, but I didn't want that. I wanted it to actually say something that was dynamically generated on the records themselves. So that's how you'll see when we go in here and we generate this document. Again, under the description column, we included the label. Under the description column, we also included the total. So that's how you can kind of vary the subtotal labels and the total labels. So one more thing I wanted to kind of address is some additional field types that you'll see inside of the configurator. So I open the configurator for this one document template, the one that we've been using, number 1. Okay, actually, you know what? Well, there's one when I go from the document templates table, you can get to the subtable configurations right through here as well. So if I click on this configuration and open this up a bit. Okay. So we default, when you choose a column, we default the text, the type based on the type that's defined inside of Quickbase. So if you want to, one of the things that we get asked a lot is if I have a field that is a decimal field, the default we set is numeric, but if you want decimals to show up, you should choose float or change it to be float. And float really will allow us now to show those decimal points. So a lot of times people say, hey, I have decimals in my records, but how come I don't see the decimals come out in Exact Forms Plus? So an example of that is in this one estimate here. I have my quantity field and I have 545, but then I also have 1.5 and 5.75. Now, I didn't make that save, so I didn't change the data. So it's still as numeric. So you'll see that we didn't really change the columns, but in this subtable, I did make the save so you can see that the decimals do hold. So if it doesn't have a decimal, it's not going to show anything, but if it does have a decimal, it'll show. So again, use float if you have a numeric field that you define that does include decimals, so that you want those decimals to come out here in Exact Forms Plus. Another option, and one thing that we wanted to show was multi-select text. So I just wanted to show you how Exact Forms Plus handles that. So if I go in, if I do have a multi-choice field, I believe in here, in my items, you know what, let's see which items have. Just want to see which items I did do that for. Okay, in this case, in this estimate right here, I have 3 choices for size, and it's a multi-select text field. So I'm not sure if I have it in the config. If not, I'll add it to a config. I think I'm going to have to add it to a config, which is fine. Right, because I want to generate I don't have that column in here, but let's do that. So let's go into my subtables. Let's go into strad1, and let's add the multi-select text field. So I'm going to go into my subtotal fields. I'm going to choose my where is it? Sizes. Sizes is my field. Now it's still defined as a text field, which is fine. But when Exact Forms Plus sees this, it'll treat it as a text field unless you change it to multi-select. Okay, so that's one thing you got to do. If you want it to come out in a custom format, you got to choose multi-select and then hit save. So when we do that, the next time I generate that template, that document using template number 1, I just want to make sure the items are in this one that I chose. Yes, okay. So I'm going to regenerate that document. We should see a new column at the end for sizes. And I think only on one line item I chose the sizes, but you're going to see how it looks. It's a bulleted list. Now, it looks terrible here because I didn't size it properly. So I need to go back into the configurator. And I'm probably going to have to take a little bit, and this is one thing that Mike alluded to too, is obviously you have to kind of strategically place some of these descriptions and some of these widths, because since I just added one at the end, I might want to take some from the description so that I can increase the size of this one while still not killing my description field, but allowing some space for my other new column. So go back in here, generate the document. And now you can see, so text multi-select will come out in bulleted format if you choose multi-text in the configurator. If you don't, it's just going to come out in, I think it's semicolon separated text. So it would be small, semicolon, large, semicolon, extra large. So changing it to multi-select will give you this format. And we don't offer any other options, so we'll always do bulleted list like that. So that's what you'll see for the multi-select. And last but not least, I wanted to show some images. So I have a template that Shows images. I think it's the, let me just pull this one up here. There's all my line items with images. Okay, this guy right here. So I have a template that uses images, uses my images, template 3. So it's going to create the document to show you the images. Okay, so basically I have an image that's in a standard file attachment field on this line item. So I just uploaded the file, and that's what this shows here. Now, I took that same file attachment field, I created a formula rich text field, and I surrounded it with a little HTML. So I said, all right, point to, show an image, point to the field that has the file attachment, which is file attachment field 26, and just surround it with a div tag. Now notice there's no sizing parameters in here. We don't do well with sizing parameters inside of HTML tags. So if we see the size tags, you might see an HTML error. So you got to remove the sizing there. How we really size it is based on the pixel width of the column. So in this case, I think I chose 100 as the pixel width for this column. So that's why you see that this is a little bit bigger than this. This is the actual file attachment field. This is the formula rich text field that points to the file attachment field. But since I changed the column width to be 100, file is a little bit bigger. So that's two options for images, is you can pull it directly from the file attachment field, or you can use a rich text field to point to it and just show it in a little different way. Now, there's one other thing that I don't think too many people know about, and I want to show this option here. So let's say you wanted to show a caption above and below this image. You can do that in a rich text field like this. All I did was I surrounded the same code down here. I added a header 3 and I added a header 4, and I put some text in there. I'm just going to save this. I'm going to regenerate that. I'll talk more about that in a minute as well. Now when I generate that document, instead of it just showing the image, it's showing some text above and it's showing some text below. We introduced that because we had customers that were basically creating some catalogs. They had a wardrobe catalog and they wanted to show a caption above and below the image that they were included. We weren't really sure how to really pull that off. So if you notice, I'm going to pull this over a little bit here. This is some text is surrounded by header 3. So we know that if we see header 3, we're going to take the text between the start of the header 3 and the end of header 3, and we're going to put it above the image. And you'll see header 4 here. And we're going to take the text between header 4 and the close of header 4, and we're going to put it at the bottom. So that's why you see this. There's the top, and there's the bottom. So that's just a little bit more advanced functionality on some of our image processing. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Anything, I know I would go fast here. I wanted to try to jam as much in as I could. So please, if anything is confusing, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in.
Mike did put in a good question. Is the header code somewhere as an example? So do you have this copyable somewhere?
It's in the help site. Let's see. I believe when you go to the formula URL parameters, I think it might be in including embedded reports. If it's not here, then it's going to be, let's see here. It's probably including images then. Including images. There you go. Including images, advanced subtable images, very similar to what I showed you with the juicy guy. Here's it's actually the same exact example. So Here's the code. So you would include this inside of a formula rich text field. And the main thing you're going to want to change is going to be obviously the text and the link to, this is the file attachment field ID. So on my table, in this example, the file attachment field is number 21. So this formula says go get the file that's stored in file attachment field 21 for the current record that you're on, and include it as an image and incorporate it inside of here. Now, one more thing I want to point out in that. On the subtable configurator itself, you have to choose it as an image, even though it's rich text. You don't want to choose that as HTML, otherwise it's not going to show the image. So if I go back to the images, let me pull that up. So I'm pulling up that subtable config, and if I go to the subtable fields, you can see this is the field. I changed it to image. You don't want to choose HTML text. So whenever you're showing images and subtables, you have to choose the image type. Like even this is a file attachment field, but I changed it to image. This tells Exact Forms Plus, hey, I want to download a file and show it as an image, because that's kind of what we have to do, is we have to download the file from Quickbase in order to convert it to an image.